Get that maintenance guy out of my boardroom, now. Edward Collins didn't even look up as he said it, his pen hovering an inch above a $200 million contract, the glass table reflecting the cold ceiling lights like a mirror of power and control, while along the wall Marcus Reed stood still in his navy work shirt, dust on his sleeves, a badge that read Facilities, catching the light for just a second too long, a detail no one else noticed, but everyone silently judged. And then Marcus took one step forward, slow, deliberate, his voice steady but quiet enough to cut through the room. If you sign that, you lose everything. And just like that, the air changed, the low murmur died. A dozen executives turned their heads in unison, and for the first time since he walked in, Edward's pen stopped moving midair, suspended between arrogance and a mistake he hadn't realized he was seconds away from making. Marcus Reed had learned a long time ago how to stand still without disappearing. But in rooms like this, silence felt heavier than sound, pressing against his chest as if the polished marble floors and 20-foot glass walls were built to remind him exactly where he did not belong. And yet he had been here before, not in this boardroom, but in the quiet hours before sunrise, when the building still breathed slowly and the scent of industrial cleaner hung in the air, when he and his father used to walk these same halls with mops and toolkits, fixing what others never noticed, his father always saying, "You see more from the edges than they ever will in the center." A lesson Marcus carried even now as he watched executives in tailored suits shift in their seats, some smirking, others narrowing their eyes at the audacity of a black maintenance worker speaking out of turn, their looks not loud but sharp enough to cut. And Marcus felt it, the judgment, the assumption, the quiet dismissal. That came before anyone even asked who he was. But he did not step back, not this time, because something in that contract, something buried in those pages, had already crossed a line he could not ignore. The silence cracked first from the far end of the table, a low chuckle that spread too quickly, too easily, until it turned into a ripple of laughter that bounced off glass and steel, and someone leaned back in his chair, shaking his head as if the moment was not just absurd but entertaining. Did he just interrupt a board meeting? Another voice followed, sharper, amused. No, I think he thinks he belongs in one. And a few more joined in, their smiles thin and polished, their eyes never leaving Marcus as if he were something out of place that needed to be corrected. While Edward Collins finally looked up, slow and deliberate, his gaze scanning Marcus from head to toe, pausing just long enough on the worn fabric of his shirt and the badge on his chest, a silent calculation that reduced him to a role, to a category, to something smaller than the room itself. "You are here to fix lights, not deals," Edward said, his voice calm but cutting, each word measured, controlled, and unmistakably dismissive. And a woman near the window added under her breath, loud enough to be heard, "This is exactly why access should be restricted." And Marcus felt every eye in the room settle on him, not with curiosity, but with judgment already decided, as if his presence alone had confirmed everything they believed about who should speak and who should stay invisible. Edward Collins did not raise his voice, but the shift in the room was immediate, heavier, as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a single breath, and he set his pen down with a soft, deliberate click that echoed louder than it should have. "Let me make this clear," he said, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on Marcus now with something colder than irritation, something closer to control. "You have exactly 10 seconds to explain why you are still speaking, or you will be escorted out and your access to this building will be permanently revoked." And the word permanently lingered in the air like a locked door, while a man near the center of the table checked his watch with a faint smirk, as if counting down a performance he expected to end badly. And someone else whispered, "This should be good," not even bothering to lower their voice. And Marcus could feel the weight of it pressing in from every side. The polished shoes, the tailored suits, the silent agreement that he had already crossed a line he was not allowed to see. And yet he did not move, his hands steady at his sides, his breath slow, because beneath the pressure, beneath the humiliation, there was something louder, something sharper, the memory of a clause, a number, a detail buried deep in the contract that no one else in that room had caught. And he knew, with a certainty that cut through the noise, that if he walked out now, they would sign it. and everything that followed would not be a mistake they could quietly fix, but one they would never recover from. Marcus did not raise his voice, did not step forward. He only looked directly at Edward Collins, steady and unshaken, and said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And the room shifted again, not louder this time but tighter, like something invisible had just been pulled too far, and for a fraction of a second Edward's expression flickered, not confusion, not yet, but something close to interruption, as if the script he had been following had just slipped, and then he leaned forward slightly, his fingers brushing the edge of the contract again, ready to dismiss it all with a signature. But Marcus's eyes did not move. They stayed locked, calm, certain, and that certainty did not belong to a man guessing. It belonged to someone who had already seen the outcome, and that was the moment, the smallest pause, when the pen did not move, when the room held its breath without realizing it, when even the quiet confidence of power hesitated. Edward Collins did not speak right away, but his eyes dropped to the contract, slower this time, more deliberate, and Marcus saw it, that subtle shift, the first crack in certainty, because the clause was not obvious. It never was, buried deep in Section 14, subsection C, written in language that sounded protective but quietly transferred liability in a way that only someone trained to read beyond the surface would catch. And Marcus took a breath, not to defend himself, but to guide the moment before it slipped away. Page 14, he said calmly. Third paragraph under liability allocation. And a few executives exchanged glances, one man pulling the document closer, another tapping his tablet to scroll, the earlier amusement fading into something less comfortable. While Edward's fingers turned the page, the faint sound of paper louder now than the entire room had been minutes ago, and as his eyes moved line by line, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, because the wording was there, hidden in plain sight, a reversal that would leave his company exposed if anything went wrong after the deal closed. And Marcus continued, not louder, just clearer. It looks standard, but it is not. It shifts everything to you, lawsuits, defaults, regulatory risk, all of it. And no one interrupted him now, no laughter, no whispers, only the quiet weight of realization beginning to form, because this was not a guess, not a lucky observation. It was precise, technical, the kind of clarity that did not come from someone guessing from the sidelines. And that was when the real question entered the room without being spoken, not who made the mistake, but who exactly Marcus Reed really was, because men like him were not supposed to see things like this, not from the edge of the room, not wearing a maintenance badge, and yet he had seen it first. The silence did not break this time. It settled, heavy and undeniable, as Edward Collins slowly lowered the contract onto the table, his fingers no longer steady, and across from him one of the senior partners cleared his throat. "He is right," he said quietly, almost reluctantly, and that was when every eye returned to Marcus, not with amusement, not with dismissal, but with something else, something closer to uncertainty, and Edward finally looked at him fully, not at the badge, not at the uniform, but at the man. "Who are you?" he asked, the question no longer rhetorical, and Marcus reached calmly to his chest, not to remove the badge, but to turn it over, revealing a second card clipped behind it, clean, untouched, the name printed in sharp black letters, Marcus Reed, Risk Compliance Consultant, and beneath it, a firm name that several people in the room recognized instantly, one that had audited billion-dollar mergers and shut down deals twice this size, and a quiet ripple moved through the room as realization landed all at once. Not just that they had been wrong, but how wrong they had been, because Marcus had not spoken out of place. He had spoken from experience, from authority they had never thought to look for, and Edward's voice, when it came again, was no longer sharp. "Why are you wearing that badge?" And Marcus answered without hesitation, "Because sometimes the only way to see the truth in a room like this is to stand where no one thinks to look." No one laughed this time. No one checked their watch. No one whispered under their breath, because the weight in the room had shifted completely, and Edward Collins slowly pushed the contract away from him, as if it no longer belonged on the table. The deal paused, the signatures undone, and for the first time since the meeting began, the power in the room was not sitting at the head of the table. It was standing quietly near the wall, and Marcus did not wait for an apology, did not ask for recognition. He simply turned and walked toward the door, his steps steady, his reflection stretching across the polished floor, and behind him the silence said everything they could not. Because sometimes the greatest mistake is not what you sign, but who you choose to ignore.